Hello everyone, welcome to another tutorial. This time we are going to be talking about Act 2, Scene 3 of Macbeth. It's a big scene, an important scene, so we're going to split it in two. This is part 1. First things first, could you please have a look at the definition of this word here, which is equivocation, or someone being an equivocator. Find your document, which should look something like this, and please write down the definition of equivocation here. It's very important that you understand this word because it's repeated quite a few times throughout this scene, but also thematically it's very important to understand it in terms of the whole of the play of Macbeth. So the definition is the use of ambiguous or unclear language to conceal the truth or to avoid committing oneself. That's the definition, but you have to understand what it means. So it's using language to be economical with the truth. It's not lying outright, but it's not it's using language to manipulate the person that you are talking to. So it's about deceit, it's about manipulation, and hopefully you're starting to draw links between deceit, manipulation, and some bigger themes within Macbeth. So go ahead, write down your definition in this point in your document now, pause the video here. Okay, so Act 2, Scene 3, like I say, it's an important scene. The knocking that ended at the end of Scene 2 continues. We are introduced to a stumbling, grumbling, drunk or hungover porter who provides a brief moment of comic relief. Remember, the tension's been extremely high up until this point with the murder of Duncan, and then Macbeth, as has been depicted here, being unable to return to the scene of the crime with the murdered weapons. And the porter is there really to relax the audience after this heightened tension. And the porter here is complaining about the effects of alcohol as he goes to open the castle gates to Lennox and Macduff. Macduff, who's obviously very important to this part of the play, arrived to wake up the king and to continue their journey. Macbeth allows him to enter the chambers, and this is where he finds the body of the king and raises the alarm. Obviously, chaos ensues, and Macbeth kills the drugged guards in rage, while finally Malcolm and Donalbain, both sons of Duncan, agree to flee to Ireland and England, that should be, respectively. So Ireland and England, respectively. This is the next thing you need to do. You're going to watch this video here, which looks something like this from this woman. I would like you to watch that and in 20 words or fewer summarize Act 2, Scene 3 in this part of your document. So again, if you can pause the video here, summarize the act in this part of the document. So there are 4 main reasons why this scene is particularly important. Number 1, Shakespeare establishes Macbeth's castle Dunsinane as a symbol of hell. The references to hell are frequent in the first part of this scene. The porter himself thinks he's the gatekeeper of hell, and so Dunsinane, Macbeth's house, is seen as the crucible of evil. 2. We see signs of Macbeth's growing ruthlessness. Gone is the person who's described as not having or having too much of the milk of human kindness as previously in the play. Now we see a ruthless murderer. 3. We see Lady Macbeth using her own deceptive skills as an equivocator, perhaps playing into a stereotypical feminine role to her advantage. So she's using her femininity in order to seek advantages. And finally, 4, Shakespeare establishes what will be a long-running grudge between Macduff and Macbeth. In this part of your document, I've given you 4 places to write those 4 things. Could you do that now, please? So because it's quite an important and large scene, we're going to split this particular scene into 2. This lesson is going to focus on the start of the scene, so it's the essentially known as the porter scene, and next lesson will focus on the reaction to Duncan's murder once Macduff realizes that the king has been murdered. Okay, so it's very important that you actually look at this scene in context, so you need to click on this link, which will take you to this, which is the original Shakespearean version and a modern translation. Remember, there's been a huge amount of tension, a huge amount of chaos. The king is dead, God's representation on earth is dead, and Shakespeare decides to put in this rather quirky scene. So, Macbeth's castle, Dunsinane, is depicted as hell, and this depiction is an echo of what's just occurred in the castle. The most evil act you can imagine, the assassination of the king. So let's have a look at a couple of things that the porter says. So he says, if a man were porter of Hell Gate, in the name of Beelzebub, here you'll sweat for it. Who's there in the other devil's name? But this place is too cold for hell. I'll porter it no further. So the reference here to the devil, Beelzebub, it's a Hebrew term for the devil, and there's various references to hell. Now, hell is something that we use quite leisurely today in terms of a description or in terms of an insult. But hell was a very real circumstance for a Jacobean audience. And certainly if you look through the descriptions of the things that the porter is describing, he talks about a farmer that saved all of his crops to go into a time of plenty so he could charge more for it. That would have been something that was seen as absolutely heinous and worthy of being sent to hell. How about this? This is a con man who lied under oath and committed treason for God's sake. That again would have been something that would have been sent to hell. And how about this? This is a guy, an English tailor, who skimped his clients by using fewer bits of cloth. Again, conning his clients out of money. Now, the references here are important because he's directly saying that if you do something wrong, that there are going to be consequences. This is particularly important to think about, well, why is it here? Because Macbeth has just done the worst thing known to man. So it's foreshadowing what is going to come for Macbeth. So there are very many references to hell, not just the people who are in hell and the people who inhabit hell, con men, equivocators, but also the temperature of hell. Here you'll sweat for it. This is Macbeth's castle we're talking about, remember, but this place is too cold for hell. I'll porter it no further. The porter realizing that he's just pretending that he is the porter to Hell's Gate. So you have two things to do now. In your document, please consider, why do you think Shakespeare is making Macbeth's castle sound like hell? Think about what I've just said, but also use your own interpretations. And as perhaps for an extension, you might consider answering this. What might Shakespeare have been suggesting about those that had ideas about the assassination of King James? Remember, contextually, this play was written in the shadow of the gunpowder plot, full of deception and deceit and betrayal. Why would this particular scene resonate with that Jacobean audience? Pause the video here and fill in these two sections now. So because this scene is considered as an element of comic relief, it's often passed over quite quickly, and I've certainly been guilty in previous years of rushing through it to get to the more meaty, important scenes. However, it's important to recognise that the Porter scene does mark a structural change. Yes, it is comic relief, but it does also highlight the intensity that you've just experienced by watching the murder or experiencing the murder of Duncan. In fact, it's so important that a couple of years ago, an exam board did use this in the exam. So it's important to recognise that this could come up in your exam. Having said all that, have a look at what the Porter says here. It is certainly, or certainly to a Jacobean audience, it would have been rather humorous. Considering what's just happened before as well, it often is the case that when you feel extremely nervous, you tend to giggle or laugh, and certainly that's what the audience would have felt here. Macbeth's tremendous guilt after the assassination of Duncan, he forgets to leave the daggers in the chamber, so Shakespeare lowers the intensity so that he can raise it again when the body is discovered. And how does he do that? Well, let's have a look. Marry, sir, nose, painting, sleep, and urine. This is the Porter talking about what drink does to you. Well, he's saying that it turns your nose red, it puts you to sleep, and it makes you urinate. It also says it provokes the desire but takes away from the performance. It makes you lustful but means that you can't perform sexually. So this would have had the Jacobean audience in raptures, and it is a useful tool to then reduce the tension in order to ramp it up later on. But I would argue that although it is certainly an element of comic relief, it's not just there for a laugh. The Porter isn't just there to be laughed at. It's more than that, because the theme of equivocation, the theme of deception and betrayal, is really highlighted in this scene. The Porter explains that a equivocator or a con man is one who could lie on both sides of the scales of justice and sound believable in both cases. Does that sound like anything or anyone to you that we may have discovered in Macbeth? For example, the tailor who skimps on his materials, substituting cheap cloth for expensive, is an equivocator. He's doing his job, but he's conning his clients. Drink at the same time is an equivocator. It makes you feel great, but it takes away the things that you should feel great about. Have a look at this example here. What time did you get in last night? Well, we left the Civic Centre at 11. It's only half an hour drive and there's plenty of time to be in by midnight. Well, were you home by midnight? You've neglected to mention that you stopped for a pizza and took the long way home. In this case, you didn't lie, but you deliberately tried to mislead your parents into believing something that's not true. You were being an equivocator. It's an example of an equivocation. So a lie is not actually told, but the truth isn't told either. It's being economical with the truth. So with the idea of equivocation firmly in your mind, you now have two tasks to complete. I'd like you to try and explain how equivocation is used when Macbeth visits the witches later on in the play for the second set of prophecies. So the second time that Macbeth goes to see the witches, what is he told? This picture might remind you, but also just have a quick Google what happens in Act 4, Scene 1, and that will tell you exactly what the witches tell Macbeth. But how is equivocation used? How does Shakespeare use language to deceive Macbeth? The second thing is, why might Shakespeare have used language that equivocates with the witches particularly? Why is it important that the witches use this particular language of deceit and betrayal? I'll give you a big hint here. It's something to do with Macbeth and Macbeth's desire to do bad things. And those two tasks need to be filled in this part of your document. The last task I have for you today is watching 3.5 minutes of this video, and the video looks something like this, and it talks about a little bit more about ambiguity and equivocation. Watch up until 3 minutes and 35 seconds, and please make notes on the importance of equivocation with reference to these guys who I'm sure you are familiar with. So if you could do those notes, please, in this part of your document. And that's it. Shouldn't take you any more than 45 minutes to complete this lesson. Good luck.